Hello and welcome to episode number 10 of Chel Squared. We're at double digits. Already got a smile on my face just saying that. I'm your host, Andrew Chel, and oh man, do we have an episode and a half for you today. Before we get started, please make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and more. We're going to dive into advanced analytics and why they're crucial to not just hockey, but sports in general, expectations for the New York Rangers this season and who can make a big impact, expectations for Henrik Lundqvist and what kind of pressure is put on him for 2018-2019, what the overall goaltending outlook looks like now with newly signed Dustin Byufglien in the mix. We're also going to do a deep dive into the Rangers prospect system and talk dark horses to potentially make the opening night roster and beyond. And in case you haven't seen, NHL Network released its top 20 wingers in the NHL list, and I mean, it's bad. The last two lists were bad. This one's bad. Mike Johnson, who played in the NHL for 13 seasons, 661 games, 129 goals, 375 total points, works for NHL Network as an analyst. He made his own list and put Alex Ovechkin, number 5. 5th? Excuse me? This is Alex Ovechkin we're talking about here. Alex Ovechkin. Wait until you hear who he put over the Great Eight. Spoiler, it doesn't matter, because it's wrong. He's wrong. Chel Squared is, as noted in the show synopsis, dedicated to breaking down the latest news, rumors, and just the right amount of hot takes around the National Hockey League. The knowledgeable guest I have on this week's show is Drew Way, contributor to BlueShirtBreakaway.com and overall advanced analytics extraordinaire. Drew, thank you so much for coming on this week. How are you doing?
I don't know if I'd use the term extraordinaire, but I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Congratulations on the baby, by the way. Declan Way, first overall pick in 2036, ahead of Alex Ovechkin's son, Sergei, you think?
You know how I can tell you're not Irish? Because you just called him Declan. It's Declan.
Declan, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's I'm cool. Sorry.
No, it's a very Irish name. But he's 3 months old, and he's kind of a ticking time bomb in the next room right now. So he's going down for his nap now, and hopefully he'll be nice and quiet for this recording.
Well, if he makes a guest appearance, then I'm sure we can fit in some time for him.
Yeah.
So analytics. Mm-hmm. I know in other sports like basketball, like baseball, like football, analytics are loved. They're cherished. They're a part of the game. In hockey, not so much. I mean, there's a lot of people that still think, oh, the eye test and this and that and, advanced analytics ruin the game or whatever. What do you say to those people, and, why are analytics so important in not just hockey, but in sports overall, do you think?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, there's this idea out there that among hockey fans that the analytics crowd thinks that the numbers are the end all be all. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. Every single one of these, statisticians that you see who are creating these WAR models or these expected goals models and things like that, all of them probably watch more hockey than you and I. And so this notion that these guys really into analytics and these statisticians don't think that numbers are the only thing that matter is bullcrap. But yeah, it's just raw. It's a false narrative. Every person worth their salt will say you need both numbers and traditional scouting or the eye test, whatever you want to call it. But with that said, the reason why analytics are so important is because data is objective. Obviously, humans can take data and twist it in a way to make it serve their own purpose or their own goal. But data is objective, and human beings are not. Every single scout in the world, even the best scouts out there, have their biases. Sometimes it comes in the form of you just like a certain style of player more than another. You get recency bias is a huge thing. You have all sorts of biases that creep in when you're doing traditional scouting. And all scouts will tell you this. A family member of mine is in the front office of the Rangers, and he will straight up says that, all scouts are biased. And one of the keys to being a good scout is understanding what your biases are and then being able to account for that. And so that's why, analytics are so important, is because, the data is unbiased. And so when you take your traditional scouting and you then combine it with the data, you can get a full view of who a player is, how they contribute to a team.
So why do you think because in other sports they're praised and they're used so much more. I mean, in baseball especially, like you can see advanced analytics just by going on the MLB website. They have, the walks per nine and, and strikes per nine and all of that. They have so much information ready to go for the average viewer because advanced analytics have already engulfed themselves into not just the hardcore fans, but also the average fan as well. Why do you think that hockey is lagging behind in that sense? Because I'm totally with you. I love analytics. I think they are a great complement to the game. But for some reason in hockey, people are just not on board with more than hashtag grit and looking at plus minus for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, there's three things. And as a quick tangent before I get into the three things, plus minus is an analytic. It's a stupid analytic because it is constructed in a manner that it is biased towards penalty killers and biased away from power play guys. But that's neither here nor there. There's sort of three things, I think, why analytics have struggled to catch on in hockey relative to some of the other sports. First, analytics have been around in baseball for a lot longer. Billy Beane kind of, is known as one of the pioneers in baseball. Bill James, a lot of the main analytics guys all started in baseball. And the reason, and so because it's just been around for so much longer, there's been so much more time for it to take hold and for it to, be proved, for its value to be proven. Another thing why baseball in particular statistics have caught on so much better, especially these advanced stats, is baseball is a series of individual events. It's very easy to measure the cause and effect of every single play, whereas a sport like hockey and basketball are much more free-flowing sports, and it's harder to pinpoint kind of exactly what happened. To use, in hockey, a lot of the times, the thing that happened that ended up really causing the goal is something that isn't recorded on the stat sheet. Sometimes it's, was a back check where a guy, pressured a defender pressured the guy with the puck, got it, made a crisp pass up the zone, which then led to a breakout, which then led to a goal. That's not going to go anywhere on a stat sheet. And whereas in baseball, it's blatantly obvious what happened. You have the pitcher against the batter, then the batter hits it. Then you have the fielder against, the ball. It's much more easy to measure exactly what is the cause and effect of every single play. And then the third, honestly, is just like the makeup of hockey fans. I don't think I'm being too controversial by saying that hockey's made up of a lot of old grumpy white dudes. And old grumpy white people tend to not like progressive stuff like statistics. In baseball, a lot of the guys that pioneered it originally were young, and baseball statistics got a ton of pushback when they first came around. But now guys like Billy Beane and stuff have been around for 20, 30 years that are kind of, respected baseball men, whereas all the respected hockey men are these grumpy old dudes who hate statistics. Eventually, I think you'll see the same thing where some of these younger guys like the John Chaykas of the world will, once they've kind of established more of, a footing and the older guard goes to pass, and then guys like John Chayka are the ones that are viewed as the kind of more respected, veterans, then you'll really see them take hold within organizations more. But they have come a long way, and they're coming a long way right now. And I think, I'm looking forward to where it goes in the future.
I mean, math is hard. You might like math a lot more than I mean, I know for a fact that you like math a lot more than I do. I never liked math. But I am such a big proponent of analytics because it tells you so much of the story that the basic stat line isn't telling you. The outlet passes, the defensive entries, the offensive entries, all the passes and all the breakups, especially for defensemen, to see their breakup percentage, how many, what plays are working, which aren't working. And it's not just for the fans, but for the coaches and for the teams as well, to have these numbers available. It's not, you shouldn't take them 110% and look at nothing else, but as a compliment, they really, really do paint a much better picture of who is playing well and who isn't playing well. Because there's been a lot of times where the eye test can tell you one thing, but in reality, long-term longevity, when you look at everything broken down, you see that, player X is not as good as you thought, or better than you thought they would be in a lot of situations as well. Like Henrik Lundqvist, for example, right? One of the best goalies in the world, bar none. No one that really understands hockey is going to dispute that. Whether he's a top 5 goalie right now on August 23rd, I mean, let's probably slow down at this point, but looking back at history, Henrik Lundqvist is one of the best goalies ever. And we knew that watching him. I'm a Rangers fan, you're a Rangers fan. We watch a lot of Rangers games. We know Henrik Lundqvist is one of the biggest reasons the Rangers made the playoffs for most of the years that he's been on the team. I mean, they had a lot of bubble teams that were pushed to the playoffs only because of his play. When you look at his analytic, Lundqvist has done more for the Rangers than any other goalie in memory.
Probably since Dominic Hasek.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, he's good. Also, his contract, I mean, it doesn't look so bad now, does it? $8.5 million sounds like a lot. It's not that bad when you consider everything that he's done over the past, decade and a half of just brilliance. I mean, last season, last couple of seasons, he hasn't been, the 2014 or 2012 goalie, but he's still Lundqvist. And when the team in front of the goalie isn't as good, numbers are going to drop. That's what's going to happen. I mean, look at Carey Price. He had one of the worst. He had the worst season in his career, but he's still Carey Price, and the team is god awful in front of him. So yeah, his numbers are gonna drop because
you want a hot take? I think Carey Price is one of the most overrated players of the last 10 years.
Oh boy. All right. Well,
he's when you look across his career, he's had one absolutely phenomenal, borderline historic season where he won the MVP. Then he's had a couple other seasons where it's like, all right, he was pretty good. He got some Vezina votes. And then he's got a couple of straight up bad seasons. And then he's got some injured seasons. And, I'm not saying he's bad, but people hold Carey Price in this esteem like there's already people that are like, oh yeah, he's a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. I'm like, what? He honest to God, like go look at his advanced bet. I hate save percentage. Save percentage is so contingent on your defense in front of you. But if you go look at his metrics, like his goals save above average, which take into account the shot quality he's facing, and his adjusted save percentage, which kind of takes what's his expected save percentage, what's his actual save percentage, and is he plus or minus that. When you look at some of his advanced metrics, like there were some seasons where he just wasn't that good. And again, Carey Price, when he's on, he's awesome, but he's been inconsistent enough where I don't understand why he is even talked in the same conversation as Roberto Luongo over the course of his career, let alone, some of the other guys that he's spoken about. I mean, I've had Canadian fans tell me he's better than Dubois, which just makes me laugh.
Yikes. I mean, Roberto Luongo also saved 3 separate franchises, which is ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, he saved the Islanders for a little bit, then he got traded. He saved Vancouver, and he also saved Florida on 2 separate occasions.
People will push back on things because Lundqvist and Luongo don't have a cup. Both of them should be first ballot Hall of Famers, no questions asked. But, you got these people that think, team accomplishment should speak for the individual, who will argue about Lundqvist being a Hall of Famer, which is just absolutely ridiculous to me. In my opinion, and this isn't even being like a Rangers bias, when you dig down into the numbers, Lundqvist is one of the 10 best goalies to ever play the game.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's one of those things where, because he doesn't have a ring, there's a sense that, he's not that good, or this and that. But
people be like, he's a playoff choker. I'm like, really? He's literally one of the best Game 7 performers in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
I think Braden Holtby recently broke, got a little bit above him in terms of, again, I don't like save percentage, but that's the metric everyone uses. But, until very recently, Henrik Lundqvist, I believe, had the highest, if not one of the top 3 highest save percentages in Game 7 history. But sure, he's a playoff choker. Don't let the facts get in the way of your narrative.
Well, it's one of those things where, I mean, Holtby prior to this season was terrible in the playoffs. He was awful. This past season, he's kind of broken out of that, and he played very well to eventually win the cup. I mean, Holtby was one of the biggest reasons, if not, well, he definitely was one of the biggest reasons why the Caps won the cup. And, probably behind Kuznetsov and Ovechkin and Backstrom and all of that, but he was definitely up there.
If Holtby doesn't pitch back-to-back shutouts against Tampa Bay, they're not even in the in the finals. So.
Right.
And Holtby, I think he was very good early in his career. I mean, in those early playoff runs against the Rangers, Holtby was excellent. He just the past couple of years, he had I think he was 2 kind of off playoffs, and then everyone kind of soured on him. But this year in the playoffs again, once he kind of got the job back, he kind of showed everyone, hey, I'm still one of the best goalies in the league.
Right. I mean, people forget that Holtby lost his starting position in the first 2 games of the playoffs. I mean, that was how iffy Holtby looked prior to that point.
Yeah, and you know what? And this is kind of the Lundqvist point. I mean, being a goalie, sustaining success in the NHL as a goalie is hard. Braden Holtby is unquestionably one of the better goalies in the NHL right now, and he lost his starting job for about half the season this year. And the NHL history is littered with goalies like that who are fantastic for years and then just lose it for a season, but then are fantastic again. I mean, everyone's talking about Pekka Rinne right now. I mean, I won't be surprised if like a third of the way through the season, he's not even the starter in Nashville. And it's just the way goalies are. So the fact that a guy like Lundqvist can do what he did for as long as he did, he's unquestionably the best goalie in Rangers history. And if you think Richter is, go back and rewatch the Rangers. Richter was Jonathan Quick. He made a lot of great saves because he was out of position all the time, and he had a couple good playoff runs, but he didn't have anywhere near the long-term success as Lundqvist. Lundqvist is unquestionably the best Rangers goalie in history and one of the better goalies in NHL history.
I mean, that's a great comparison. You look at Mike Richter and the way he played. I mean, he was definitely a great goalie. I
grew up idolizing him. Like I was born in 1998. So I grew up loving Adam Graves and Mike Richter in that team. But to the people who, say Richter's better than Lundqvist because of a cup, go look at that 94 roster. That team was stacked beyond stacked. I'd argue that the fact that Richter only won 1 cup with those early and mid-90s teams is more of a black mark against his resume than the fact that Lundqvist has 0 when you compare the talent that these teams had. I mean, Christ, like Sergei Zubov, people forget, led the team in points, I believe, in the regular season in 94, let alone Brian Leetch and Mark Messier and Adam Graves and a young Alex Kovalev, and the trades that they made to bring in a couple of veteran future Hall of Famers that year. I mean, that team was beyond stacked. But yeah, like I said, I love Richter. Absolutely love him. I don't mean this as an insult to him, but he's not nearly the goalie that Lundqvist is.
Would you compare then Richter to, say, a Vasilevsky in this case? Because Vasilevsky sure had a stacked team this season, and, well, they didn't win the cup.
It's hard. Vasilevsky's so young. It's like I said, Jonathan Quick is my comparison, even in the style. They both make a lot of flashy saves. They get, and which gets people excited. Oh my God, did you see that save by Quick? I mean, Quick, if you look at just Quick's highlight reel, his is as good as any. But when you really watch him, a lot of the saves Quick makes is because he's out of position. Quick has pretty poor rebound control. He gets out of position fairly often. And luckily for him, he's athletic enough and agile enough where he can then get back and make some of the saves he does. But he makes it harder on himself than it needs to be. And Richter was the same way back in the day. And unfortunately for Richter, he then had a lot of injury concerns, which, kind of cut his career short and season short. And, Richter had a couple-year stretch there where he was, just about as good as anyone in the league. But, just because he won a cup, you can't throw away the fact that Lundqvist was at his peak better than Richter and did it for twice as long.
It's one of those things where I've said this multiple times for years now. Jonathan Quick, if you shoot anywhere below the waist, you're never going to score. If you shoot anywhere above that, chances are it's going to go in the net. Jonathan Quick is one of those players where he's always down low. He's always, looking around, trying to find the puck. I mean, especially if there's people in front. Jonathan Quick is, he's a solid goaltender, like you said, but you're absolutely right in that sense where he likes to move a little bit too much. and that really takes away from what he's accomplished. I mean, again, 2 cups, 2 rings, all of that. That's great.
And to be fair, Quick was dominant in those cup runs.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not taking that away from him.
Yeah.
Like, he was every bit the reason why the Kings have 2 cups as Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty were. But again, like when you look across the entire body of work, like Quick has been very average for a lot of his career.
Absolutely. But in terms of the Rangers right now, right, they were pretty average, you could say, last season.
That's being awfully kind.
Yeah, 77 points, one of the worst teams in the East, 34 wins, 39 losses, and 9 losses in overtime or a shootout. Do you think that that'll be probably the record for this season, or do you think they're going to be better or worse? What's the outlook for the Rangers in 2019?
I'll start by saying I don't think the record matters. All that matters to me as a fan watching the Rangers is how well are the kids progressing.
Which is refreshing. Very refreshing.
How good does the team look under David Quinn's system? I understand there have been a couple writers now that have taken deep dives into David Quinn's system in college but there have been a couple college coaches that have come up, made their debuts in the pros recently. It's hard to say are they going to keep the exact same system in the pros as they played in the NCAA? Still, I appreciate the work that some of these guys have done in breaking down what the system was, but it's, we still don't really know exactly what he's going to do other than, what he said to the media. And Quinn seems very upfront, which is nice, and a breath of fresh air. Whereas Vigneault, you just got these, stupid cliches all the time. But it's still, it's hard to kind of project what this team's going to be without really knowing what kind of style they're going to be playing. I will say, though, that it does seem like they're going to go to more of a zone system on defense, which is vital given some of the guys they have. Vigneault played sort of a hybrid man system. It was he played this overload system. It was like an overload man, and it didn't work for the personnel they had. In order to thrive under Vigneault's system on defense, you need to be a good skater. And the Rangers didn't have very many good skaters on defense last year. If you are a Stahl truther and you really think that Mark Stahl still has something good left in the tank, the silver lining is a zone system should suit him better, seeing that he's not very mobile anymore. So he can rely more on things like gap control and his vision as opposed to having to skate to get back to cover areas. But I'd say, the Rangers going forward, I don't think they're going to be very good. They could be one of those teams that, high energy, a lot of youth, pesky enough to play against, and Lundqvist does good enough where they can kind of be a fringe playoff team around the deadline. But I'd be stunned if they got over 90 points. I can see them upper 70s, low 80s seems likely, but a lot of how many points they end with depends on what they do at the deadline. My biggest fear as a fan is that the Rangers are like in the 8th spot around the trade deadline and they decide to become buyers instead of sellers. That I think could really hurt the rebuild because they're not there yet.
That probably would have happened under Sather. I doubt that happens under Gordon with everything that's been going on in the draft in the past couple of seasons, with especially selling big last year with McDonough, and Miller and Nash as well. I don't. If they're a fringe team, they might make a trade for a depth player at best. With Gordon, I like the way Gordon operates the Rangers for now anyway. The Cody McLeod signing, we can discuss that, but for the most part it looks as if Gordon has a vision for the Rangers, which is a youth movement, to a Russian youth movement, which I love, with Buchnevich and all these guys, and Georgiev, who's from Georgia, and all of that. It's looking like the youth will overtake the team sooner rather than later. I don't see Gordon really messing with that too much if they're an 8 seed. If Buchnevich is scoring 75 points at the deadline, and Zibanejad scoring 30 goals, and Kreider is out here scoring that that much as well, and you got Lundqvist playing like he did in the 2014 playoffs and all that. Who knows what can happen, right? But that's that's not even likely in NHL 18/19 coming out soon. I mean, that's not going to happen in reality either.
I tend to agree with you. I've maybe I've just been watching this team too long, but I never ever just bank on anything like that anymore. But I do agree. I like Gorton's vision. I have some questions about his talent evaluation process, but you know what? No GM's perfect. I'm not one of those guys that's going to sit there and flip out over every little thing the team does. Gorton absolutely has some, old school mentalities about him that I wish he didn't have. But to be fair, pretty much every GM in the NHL has those.
Right.
But I like his overall vision. I like kind of the things that he's been doing overall. To me, he makes 2 good moves for every 1 poor move, which is, by NHL GM standards, that's pretty good.
Absolutely. I mean, I put out the poll question earlier today on Twitter, by the way, if you want to vote on the poll, and if you want to tweet at the poll to potentially be featured on Chel Squared, then for sure follow us on Twitter at Chel Squared. Follow the show on Facebook as well, Chel Squared. I put out the question for this show was, how many points do you realistically see the Rangers getting this season? And the options were 100 plus, 90 plus, 75 to 90, and under 75. Now, the poll got over 130 votes.
I hope no one voted over 100.
One person did.
I think one person's just trolling you. Nobody's that stupid.
I mean, I would hope so.
Actually, you know what? I take that back. There are people that are that stupid. You have a whole segment of our fan base that hates Lundqvist. So, I take that back. There are people that are that stupid.
Fair point. 2% of the vote voted over 100 points, which is if you played all 82 games in NHL 18 with that team, you probably won't 100 plus points. I mean, it's a good roster on paper.
It's a good forward group on paper.
Yeah. The forward lineup is looking good with Kreider, Zibanejad, Booch, Zuccarello, and Lias Anderson, Philip Hedl, Kevin Hayes. But the blue line, and you got Brady Shea, Kevin Shattenkirk, of course, and then Mark Stahl, Brandon Smith, who played in the AHL last season. I mean, that's a whole different point. I mean, it looks as if from reports about Brandon Smith that he's lost weight, that he's improved, that he's got quicker. We'll see about that. You got Neil Pionk, who I am sold on. I really do like Neil Pionk. Anthony DeAngelo, I'm not sold on. I'm not a big DeAngelo fan on the ice, but I mean, I hope the best. From what I've seen, isn't as good as I would have liked, but hopefully this season you can turn it around. So 100 plus on the poll, 2%, 5% voted 90 plus, 75% voted 75 to 90, and 18% voted under 75, which is about right.
I think they're only getting under 75 if Lundqvist gets hurt.
Yeah.
That 75 to 90 seems about right to me. And I will say, though, that I do think that Anthony DeAngelo is better than people. Or Tony DeAngelo, sorry, right? He's Tony now.
Yeah. I
understand that people want to not like him because of the off-ice stuff. And listen, I'm a pretty liberal dude and not a fan of some of the things that he said in his past. But I don't want to get into that. But just as a player, he's better than people give him credit for, and you started to see that last year until he got hurt. And one of the things is one of the guys that one of the Hockey Graphs guys did a presentation at the recent Hockey Analytics conference in Rochester, and I'm blanking on which statistician did this presentation, so apologies. But his whole presentation was about how he dug into all the data and stuff like that. And one of the most impactful things for driving success is zone exits. How good are you at taking the puck from your own defensive zone and moving it up the ice? And when you look at some of the micro stats that you kind of alluded to before about the passing data and the zone exit data and stuff like that, Tony DeAngelo, when I looked it up, was among the very best. And again, small sample size, but was among the very best in the entire NHL in terms of getting out of your own zone. And so if you want, a little ray of hope, if he's used properly, I mean, he was poor in his own zone, was getting better, but he'll never be a stalwart in his own zone. But he's the type of guy that if you pair him with a good partner who can maybe make up for some of those defensive deficiencies of him, there's few guys in the NHL better than him at moving the puck up the ice to the forwards. And that is a critical skill in today's NHL. And if he's used properly, I think he can be a successful second pairing defenseman who's a bit sheltered, then also used on the power play.
Well,
and that's a valuable piece in today's NHL. That's not nothing.
You got me sold. I mean, I'm now a DeAngelo fan. I mean, again, I'm not a math person. I'm not. I don't know how to do the graphs. The first thing about what it is that you do. The day.
Well, I'll say this. This isn't math though. This is Corey. I think you pronounce his name Snyder. It's like SZNJ. It's a lot of consonants in his last name.
Yeah.
But it's at Shutdown Line on Twitter. He manually tracks all this data. So he watches all the games and takes notes on all the things having to do with the zone exits, zone entries, and different passes and stuff like that. He's the one that did the tracking for this. It's not even math. It's just a matter of he's sitting down watching the games and tracking what's happening.
Which is wild, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a ton of work. And, this is his data that says Tony DeAngelo is one of the best defensemen in the NHL at getting the puck out of his own zone and moving up the ice. I was trying to pull it up just now on my computer, but of course it's not working for me right now. But I believe when I looked it up, I had a chart in one of the recent pieces I did, but I think he was in like the 98th percentile in the NHL when it came to, moving the puck up the ice.
You sold me.
Small sample size,
right.
But it's, there's reason for optimism there. And I do think, and most people seem to agree, that he was starting to actually look pretty good last year until he got hurt.
Well, I mean, he's reportedly healthy now, right? So if he continues that pace, then I'm sure people will eventually warm up to him. Again, I didn't necessarily like a lot of what he did last year, but if what you're saying is true, and I have no reason to not believe you, so I'm taking your word for it, then I'm officially a DeAngelo fan. If he really is as good as the numbers are saying that he is, well then I will watch him from a different perspective. One of the people that replied to the poll, Tyler McGillick at Tyler Richard 93 said he says 75 points for the Rangers this season. Realistically, anywhere from 30 to 35 wins, which is about right. I mean, you look at these players on paper, they're okay, but in reality, I mean, probably not a playoff team. You still have Lundqvist, you have Georgiev, now you have just Dustin Tokarski, newly acquired for a 1-year deal. And you also have Marek Mazanich in the AHL as well. What is the goalie situation, looking like? Because you have Shesterkin in Russia, who's looking like the next Lundqvist out there. So you got Shesterkin in Russia, you have Lundqvist, you have Georgiev, you have Mazanich, now Tokarski. What's the goalie situation now for the Rangers? I mean, there's no controversy. It's still Lundqvist and then everybody else.
Yeah. So
what's the outlook for the blue paint this year?
All right, real quick before I answer that, I finally was able to pull up the DeAngelo stat. So again, he had tracked 12 games of DeAngelo, so again, very small sample size. But in terms of zone entries, he was the 100th percentile in the NHL in possession entries per 60. He was the 99th percentile in the NHL in possession entry percentage, which is how successful were you at gaining the offensive zone with possession. And then in terms of his own defensive zone exits, he was 95th percentile in possession exits per 60, and he was 99th percentile in possession exit percentage. So in terms of entering the offensive zone with possession and leaving your own defensive zone with possession, Tony DeAngelo was one of the very best defensemen in the NHL last year. But so back to your question though. So the Tokarski signing, I think, is just one of those hey, competition is good kind of things. Tokarski kind of sucks. I think it was Adam Herman tried painting it in a good brush by being like, hey, look, he's got a really high low danger save percentage, so that's good. I don't agree with that at all. If you look at a lot of the data and some of the studies that have been done on this, low danger save percentage doesn't mean squat. When you look over the years at who are the best goalies at low danger save percentage, it's riddled with names that you've never heard of. What really makes or break, and there's very little variation in it. Almost every goalie saves, I think it's like 98 and something like that % of the low danger chances. But then when you look at the medium and high danger save percentages, so these are trying to save shots that come from the slot, coming on the breakaway. Your medium and high danger scoring chances. He's awful. So I'd be pretty shocked, to be honest, if he did much in the NHL, but I think it's competition, and competition is good. As much as I can sit here and throw stats at everyone, I'm a big proponent of the human side of the game needs to be taken into account as well. And, obviously nobody knows Georgiev and the goalies in the system better than, the coaches and the scouts and the people that have been watching these guys play for the past, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And if they think that maybe by bringing in some competition can really light a fire under the asses of some of these guys, then I'm all for it. So at the very least, it's just, hey, here's some more competition in training camp. Now let's see who really performs well enough to earn that backup spot in the NHL. I don't think Tokarski was signed to be like, all right, you're the backup now. I think he signed as, hey, here's some competition. If you do really well in the preseason, cool. Maybe we see him as the backup, and maybe they determine that they'd rather Georgiev get a lot more reps in the AHL as opposed to riding the bench slot in the NHL. But like you said, in terms of the goalie outlook this year, obviously Lundqvist is going to be the starter. I hope that they don't ride him too hard. Like last year, I remember at one point he was on pace for 73 starts or something like that.
Well, it's AV. AV's
exactly.
gone.
Exactly.
So we don't have to worry about that anymore.
I'm hoping that they keep him to around 55 starts. Sounds about right to me. And then give the backups a lot of work. And in terms of the prospect stuff, goalie prospect analysis is hard. I'm a bit of a prospect nerd. I wrote my own prospect rankings and stuff this year for Blue Shirts Breakaway. To be honest, I don't typically get into goalie stuff all that much. It's just it's hard. Projecting young goalies is the hardest thing to do in hockey scouting. That said, Shesterkin has been great. Him and the Islanders prospect Sorokin are clearly the two best goalie prospects in the KHL right now. You can make the argument for who's better. I know there was a really fantastic article that someone wrote. I think maybe it was for Ingoal Magazine or something like that compared the two. Consensus is Sorokin's a little bit better than Shesterkin, but it's hard to tell. And a lot of that is because Shesterkin often is the backup for his KHL team, which boggles the mind of a lot of people. But I watch more KHL than I'd care to admit for the prospect stuff that I do. And he's good. What I'd say about Shesterkin is, and this is, I'm more or less parroting something that AJ Nunn said on Twitter recently, or Alex Nunn. Is it Alex or AJ?
It's AJ_Rangers is at, but his name above that is Alex. So
well, I'm gonna, like you said, he's excellent. Everyone should follow him. And also to the major original comment, Tyler's my guy. He's awesome. People should follow him as well on Twitter. But I've seen a lot of what Alex says, and Alex has watched him far more than me. But the talent's there. Again, I was talking about the high danger save percentage and stuff like that. Shesterkin has demonstrated time and time and again that he can make those high danger saves at a high rate. He is excellent. But he doesn't get that much work in that. Though his KHL team, their defense isn't good on paper. And so because of that, he does get a high percentage of the saves he has to make are high danger shots, but he doesn't get that much work because the forwards on his team are freaking unbelievable. I mean, the forwards on his team could compete with most NHL teams. And so his team just dominates possession in the offensive zone. So he'll have a lot of games where he'll only get 15 to 20 saves because his team's got possession of the puck the whole damn time. But the saves he does make are fantastic. And so it's kind of hard to really say exactly how good he is because he flashes the talent, but you want to see more. You want to see how he handles a 30 save night or 40 save night. And he never really gets that opportunity. But he's widely considered one of the better goalie prospects in the NHL. When I didn't publish anything official, but in my opinion, the Rangers prospect system, they have a top tier of 4 guys, and you could make the argument for the order of any of these 4 guys. It's Philip Hedl, Elias Anderson, Vitaly Kravtsov, and Igor Shesterkin. Some people think Shesterkin's their best prospect. Some people would put him 4th. But to me, that's the top tier, and you can put those 4 in any order.
What about Keandre Miller? I've heard a lot of good things about him, and obviously, a young guy just drafted this year, but he's obviously going to need some work. But I've heard so many great things about his work ethic and the way that he approaches the game on and off the ice. Would you think that he's up there, or is it a little too early to put him there, do you think?
Nah, he's definitely not in that top tier. His upside is fantastic. If you're just talking about pure upside, then sure, he's up there with some of the guys. I can't stand personally when prospect guys only focus on upside. I think it's a balance of upside and how likely is this person to just have a solid NHL career. And K'Andre Miller has all the talent in the world. He's a freak athlete. I mean, honestly, when you watch him, I've watched a lot of him. And when you watch him skate, when you watch him play, he honestly looks like Chris Kreider on the ice. He's this big dude that barrels over people and is quick as lightning for how big he is. He's got a ton of offensive ability, but he's only been playing defense for a couple of years, and it's kind of evident sometimes when you watch him. I mean, he did really well last year, and he's made fantastic advances in his development in this defensive zone, but he's still very raw in his own zone. And there's still a lot of work for him to do before he realizes his full potential and then can crack the NHL. But he's the kind of prospect where, if he doesn't get any better, he's not making the NHL. And so because of that, there just comes some sort of inherent risk with that. Whereas like when you're talking Elias Anderson, he can play in the NHL right now. If he doesn't get any better, he's probably a third, fourth line player on most teams. And so there's like something that's like money in the bank. Like, he's Elias Anderson's an NHL player. Philip Hedl is an NHL player. And then you can talk upside as far as where exactly you're going to rank them. K'Andre Miller right now is not an NHL player. I think he will be, and I actually like him a lot. I'd put him on that second tier. Guys like, K'Andre Miller, Brett Howden. I like Niels Lundqvist a lot. I put him on that tier as well. There's a couple other guys that I would include. The other defenseman they got in the Tampa Bay trade. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Hayek.
Libor Hayek. Yep. You'd include there. And then Yegor Rykov. Some people would put him there. I know Scott Wheeler of The Athletic loves Rykov. But he's in that mix. He's got probably more upside than any of those guys I just named, but he's also got more risk because he's quite literally still learning how to play defense.
So a couple of questions then piggybacking off of that. What are the chances Kravtsov steals a spot in the opening night roster? And what are the chances K'Andre Miller could potentially carve out a career doing the Byufglien or the Brent Burns, in that you could play him at wing, you could play him on the blue line, and he'll exceed at both?
Well, there's a 0% chance that Kravtsov is on the line of opening night because he's under contract with his KHL.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
He could come over at the end of the season
That's
once
right.
the KHL season's over. I think, though, as terms of, I would put him at a 50-50 chance of cracking the roster next year.
Okay, so let me rephrase that. When Kravtsov's contract ends in Russia, what are the chances that immediately or almost immediately we'll see him in a Rangers jersey?
So these things are always hard to answer because there's so many variables.
Right.
How's the team doing? How are all the other kids doing? I mean, Brett Howden has a fantastic year in Hartford and gets called up. Like, that's one less spot for Kravtsov to take. So it's hard to say. I will say, though, that early on in his season, Kravtsov's looking real good for I think Tractor is his KHL team. I always mix up the names, but he's looked very good so far. He looks very dynamic. He looks, comfortable. He's a pretty good two-way player already, which impresses me the most. I kind of get annoyed, just a little tangent. A lot of people, when they're doing prospect stuff, they get so hung up on the highlight reel stuff. Like, I think Casey Middlestat, while he's a very good prospect, is one of the most overrated prospects right now because everyone just watches his highlight reels and sees his dynamic ability, and they then rank him as one of the best prospects in the NHL. And I don't. Well, he is dynamic, but I think that people often confuse dynamic talent with upside. Upside, to me, is how good of an NHL player can you be. Anze Kopitar, Ryan Getzlaf, they're not two of the most dynamic players you'll ever see, but they're two of the best players of their era. Vladimir Tarasenko is way more dynamic than either of them. Johnny Gaudreau is way more dynamic than them, but I don't think anyone would argue that either of them are better than, Anze Kopitar. And that's one thing I always try to press on people is there's a difference between upside and dynamic ability. Kravtsov has all the dynamic ability in the world right now when you watch him. And he's also that two-way player, though, which I think gives him more upside because it's hard for kids to crack the NHL if they're not at least somewhat reliable in their own defensive zone, and he's pretty good already, especially for his age. And I think that lends to him having a better chance at cracking the NHL next year. In terms of if he makes it this year, it really has to do with where the team's at and how some of the other prospects that are already in Hartford or fighting for a spot in training camp. And even how guys like Vinny Lettieri and stuff like that, kind of your fringe prospects do. But if Kravtsov kills it in the KHL and then the team, there's a clear opening for him, then yeah, I can see them bring him over at the end of the year and seeing what he could do. But next year training camp, I think he'll really be fighting for a spot. And then to answer your part about K'Andre Miller real quick, again, he's so far away, so it's hard to project. I mean, he's probably at least 2 to 3 years away from really making an impact in the NHL, and so much can go right or go wrong in that time frame. He's got the upside and the raw talent to do some of the things that I don't want to say Byufglien, because Byfuglien's Byufglien and Burns are they're so unique, but he can be both. He's got the raw ability to be a two-way defenseman with a lot of offensive upside, and then he's got the size to be a kind of a poor man's Byufglien in terms of what he can do with the physical aspects of the game. It's just a matter of putting in the work, development going right, and not getting injured.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's early, but we like to fantasize. We like to think about what could potentially be for K'Andre Miller and for Kravtsov and for Shesterkin and for everybody else for the Rangers. I mean, you wish for the best for all prospects really, but for that prospect pool is looking good for the Rangers, and you couldn't really say that with a lot of authority prior to a couple of years ago, but now
even prior to this year, last year top heavy. Last year it was Anderson and Hedl, and then we had Shesterkin, but then it kind of fell off a cliff depending on who you defined as a prospect. This year, I mean, they're loaded. Corey Pronman for the Athletic, I disagree with his mentality a lot. Go back to my rant about dynamic ability and upside and stuff like that. Pronman is the king of overrating upside and kind of underrating depth. He ranked the Rangers the 11th best prospect pipeline, where last year was the 29th. So that's a huge jump. But in his write-up, he said the Rangers are probably the second deepest prospect pipeline, and that I'd probably agree with. He had Philly, in terms of depth, he had Philly number 1, Rangers number 2. That sounds about right. If I were ranking all these systems, and again, I haven't done as much work on other team systems as Pronman does, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'd probably have the Rangers around 8 or 9 because I like Elias Anderson and Nils Lundqvist a lot more than Pronman does. To me, Anderson's the Rangers' most underrated prospect, and which I know might sound ridiculous because he's often ranked 2, 3, or 4 in their prospect rankings. But I staunchly disagree with these people who just label him as a third-line center. He, like Manny, you talked, I don't remember if we were recording or not, but you brought up Manny Perry, the guy who runs Corsica.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring that up. We talked about this before the show, but I wanted to bring this up in a second here. But yeah, Manuel Perry at Manny_hockey yesterday ran 10,000 simulations for the NHL regular season next year, the projections, and he from those 10,000 simulations has the Rangers second to dead last at an average of 75 points. Only the Sabres did worse with 74, which I think is very interesting considering everything that Buffalo has done to improve the team. And and the Rangers are still at 75. They were at 77 last year. It looks about right. Obviously it's a projection, so it's never going to be 100% perfect all the time because you first of all you don't know for a fact what's going to happen, and two, it's August. We don't know.
Well, and
we don't know opening night rosters yet either.
Yeah, Manny would be the first one to tell you that his model isn't perfect. Before I get into that, I just want to say, so he's got a prospect model also that he came out with, and he had Elias Anderson, the 10th ranked prospect in the entire NHL.
Wow.
And I'm not going to get into all the nitty gritty of his model, but it more or less the two big inputs into his model are the probability of making the NHL and then their projected WAR, which you can use as I'm not getting into an argument right now about WAR, whether it's good or not, which has been raging on Twitter all summer long, but you can use that as a proxy of him projecting, how good are they going to be, assuming they make the NHL. And with those two main inputs, he had Elias Anderson, the number 10 prospect in the entire NHL. That's probably a little high, but Anderson, I'm telling you guys, he's good. He's not flashy. He's not going to put the highlight reels together like, a Casey Middlestat will put together. But assuming health, I'm telling you, when his career is over, he's going to be looked at a very, very good pick. He does everything. He he does everything on defense. He does everything on offense. He's got a fantastic hockey IQ. He's always in the right play. He's a better passer, I think, than he gets credit for. He gets all those nitty-gritty goals in front of the net, a little bit like Ryan Callahan used to get in his heyday. That'll make fans love him once he's playing. I'm telling you, like, I think people say he's a third-line center. I honestly think second-line center is his floor. I think he's definitely going to be a second-line center. And when I say first-line center, like, he's never going to be a Sidney Crosby 1A, first line center, all capital letters, but I think because of how well-rounded his game is, and because of his hockey IQ, and because of all the little things he does to contribute to success of his line, I could see him being kind of like a Derek Stepan type like a 1B type center, where it's, he can put up 60 points, be defensively responsible, and do the things to help his line mates succeed. Okay, and that said, now I know I keep going back to stuff, and apologies for that. Just kind of the way my brain works. So to Manny's projection model, I haven't dug into. Manny usually publishes his methodology on his models. If he has done it for his projection model, I haven't seen it yet. I do want to, when he does publish it, look into it. But I know how some of his past models have worked. I'm assuming it's heavily based on a lot of the possession metrics. And the reason being things like shot expected goals and Corsi, so your shot quality and shot attempts, things like that, they've proven to be more predictive than goals. So like when you're analyzing a game, one of the things that people misinterpret with Corsi, and I see all the time, is people often throw out the Corsi numbers, the shot attempt numbers for a game that already happened, like that should be the end all be all, and that's what pisses a lot of fans off, and that's wrong. While obviously shot attempts are important in saying how a team did, the power of Corsi, the power of shot attempts, is in its predictive value. It's been proven, objectively proven, that shot attempts are a better predictor of how you're going to do going forward than goals. Reason being, goals are fluky. Sure, there are certain players in the NHL, like your Alex Ovechkin, your Vladimir Tarasenko, that can put up ridiculous goal totals despite the amount of shots they get, stuff like that. There are certain players that can kind of break the models because they are just that talented. But when you run all the players on your roster over a large sample size, like an entire season, shot attempts are a much bigger predictor of future success than goals are. And so because of that, these models are often heavily based on things like shot attempt metrics and expected goal metrics and stuff like that. And the Rangers were god-awful last year. And they've been god-awful for the past few years in terms of shot attempt metrics. And so that is likely – and I know Buffalo has been awful as well. And so that's likely a big reason why they're ranked second worst in his model. I don't – personally, I think the Rangers are headed to the lottery next year, but I think it'll be a lot more like this year where they're in that 6th to 12th worst team in the NHL as opposed to the very – basement.
The only question I have about this list right here is Ottawa. The mean points was rounded up to 70. Rounded up to it's about 75.5. Median points to 76. So Karlsson has to account for a lot of those points, because if you take Karlsson away,
and Mark Stone.
Yeah, well, Mark Stone re-signed, so that alleviates a little bit from Ottawa's offense. But
he still could be traded, though. Only signed for 1 year.
Right. Well, of course. But again, there's still a lot of questions with Mark Stone and his contract and his long-term future in Ottawa. But for right now, obviously, a lot of attention is on Erik Karlsson, because there are reports on Twitter all day today that Karlsson doesn't want an extension. If he does get traded to a Canadian team, does not want to play for a Canadian team. I saw Catherine Tappan tweet that today. I saw multiple reports on that on Twitter today. I mean, Erik Karlsson has to account for it for probably 7 or 8, 9, 10 points, maybe more.
You take Karlsson off them, and they're in the conversation for the worst team in the NHL.
Oh yeah.
You take Karlsson and Mark Stone off that team, and they are, no question about it, the worst team in the NHL. Mark Stone is fantastic.
Yeah.
He's one of the more underrated players in the NHL. If he were a UFA right now, based on his numbers and stuff like that, he'd easily get an $8 million contract.
So, kind of piggybacking off of that, to jump to NHL Network's list for top 20 wings that they put out a couple of days ago, they did not include Mark Stone.
Yeah, because they're stupid.
They did put in, Victor Arvidsson, Mikko Rantanen. I mean, Mikko Rantanen is good. I don't know if he's top 20 right now.
Mark Stone's better than both of them. Both of those are very good players. Stone's better than both of them.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, you can make the case for both. Mark Stone deserves to be ahead of both of them any day of the week, really.
And speaking of underrated players, didn't they leave Hampus Lindholm off their top 20 defenseman, or he was like low down it?
I believe so. Yeah,
it is easier to make the argument that Hampus Lindholm is a top 5 defenseman in the entire NHL than it is to make the argument that he's not top 20.
Wow. I mean, you are very high on Lindholm.
He's awesome. I could literally go on for 10 minutes as to why, and I know we're kind of running short on time, but just trust me, Hampus Lindholm is awesome. I mean, personally, I'd probably have him 5 to 10 in the NHL in defenseman, but it's easier to make the case that he's top 5 than it is to make the case that he's not top 20.
I mean, the top 20 wings list the NHL put out. I mean, first of all, they put out 2 separate lists. They put out their own company, I guess, their own network list, and then they put out Mike Johnson's list. Mike Johnson, as I said in the beginning, is an NHL veteran, over 660 games, 375 points, 13 years in the league. He knows hockey. From what I gather, the man knows the sport that he played.
Well, however, he knows at least the sport how it was played when he played, which is very different than what the sport is today.
Because I have the biggest problem with this list. First of all, he put Mark Stone 12, which is pretty fair, I think.
That's about right. Yeah, that's about right.
Pretty fair. However, he put Brad Marchand number 2, and my voice cracked just saying that. Ovechkin 5. I need to know what Mike Johnson thought when he made this list. I mean, listen.
Maybe Mike Johnson's more of an analytics fan than I give him credit for, because honestly, if you dig down into the analytics, Brad Marchand's like a top 3 winger the past couple of years.
I'm not saying Marchand is not a top 5 winger, because he can make the case that Brad Marchand is a top 5, top 10 winger for sure. I'm not, I understand. No one's arguing that. However, to put, Taylor Hall won the MVP last year, right? However, Alex Ovechkin is Alex Ovechkin.
So I'll give you the again. I mean, I'm kind of with you in the Alex Ovechkin is Alex Ovechkin, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. So, are you familiar with the statistic game score?
Yes.
So for anyone that's listening that isn't, game scores might be my favorite advanced stat because it's so easily translatable. Anyone that follows my work at Blue Shirts Breakaway knows I'm big on trying to make advanced stats more digestible for people who aren't math nerds like me. Game score is perfect because it's a catch-all statistic that tries to say the overall value of a player, but it's not like WAR or GAR or things like that. It's not based on complex regressions and stuff like that. You can calculate game score with a pen, paper, and a calculator. It's a simple formula where they take Dom L. I think it's Lushezhin. But the Athletic, he created it. And it's a formula that takes things that everyone knows are important: goals, primary assists, secondary assists, face-off hits, penalties, shot attempts. Takes those things and assigns a weight to each of them. And it's just a simple formula. You got a goal, okay, I think it's like 0.7. You got an assist, a primary assist, that's like 0.6. You got a secondary assist, that's 0.5. You got a hit, that's 0.1. And it just adds them all together, and then here's your game score. It's very similar to the game score metric that was available in basketball. And if you just want to look at their game scores, Brad Marchand, over the last 2 years, I'm using Bill Como's skater comparison tool. Over the last 2 years, Brad Marchand is in the 99th percentile of NHL forwards in game score. Alex Ovechkin's the 91st percentile. Okay. And the argument would be here that Ovechkin's a goal scorer, but Marchand's a more well-rounded player. So Marchand puts up incredible Corsi metrics, so his line always dominates with shot attempts, and then also is very good defensively, which he's helped out a lot by playing next to Patrice Bergeron. But so his game score gets padded by his team kills it with shot attempts and doesn't let up that many shot attempts. Whereas Ovechkin, I mean, I'm a big Ovechkin fan. I think he's better on defense. People get him credit for, but no one would, even the biggest Ovechkin stan in the world wouldn't say he's a plus defender. And right. So that kind of gets captured here. Again, I'm with you though. Like, I get it. Like, the hardest thing to do in the NHL is score a goal, and no one's better than Alex Ovechkin, possibly in NHL history, when you adjust for scoring rates from season to season. And so I get where you're coming from. But the devil's advocate argument is, when you look at the full game and things like game score and possession metrics and stuff like that, Brad Marchand actually does look a lot better than Ovechkin.
Again, I mean, you're that's a great point. Brad Marchand is definitely, if nothing else, one of the most underrated players outside of Massachusetts in the league. Everyone in Massachusetts loves Brad Marchand, but a lot of fans in other markets may not like him because of the stuff that he does sometimes on the ice that are less than clean. However, when you just look at Brad Marchand's game and nothing else, I mean, he's obviously one of the best wings, if not one of the best players in the league. However, Ovechkin at 5. I mean, the one thing I find interesting about these lists is both the NHL Network list and Mike Johnson's list both had Nikita Kucherov number 1. What do you think about that? Is that accurate? I love Kucherov. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love Nikita Kucherov, his game, the way he plays. I mean, everything about him I love. But number 1, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd probably have him number 1.
Okay. All right.
Look at his metrics and stuff like that. He does everything well. He's not just a goal scorer. Like, I just pulled up the skater comparison tool right now on my laptop, and I have it's over the past 2 years again. Ovechkin on the right, Kucherov on the left, and Kucherov is better than Ovechkin in almost every single statistic. Keep in mind, these charts that I'm looking at are 5v5 data only. And per 60. So Ovechkin's power play prowess is not reflected in these. And obviously a big part of who Alex Ovechkin is he's money in the bank on the power play. And the power play is a vital component to the NHL. And so for that reason, like, I'd probably put Ovechkin above Marchand, honestly, despite all the good things I just said about Marchand. Because again, scoring a goal is the hardest thing to do in the NHL. And nobody does it better than Ovechkin. Kucherov, though, would be my number 1 wing. And I actually think there might be even a decent gap between him and everyone else.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, again, I love analytics.
Who would you put at number 1?
See, it's because it's tough to make that list, right? Because I said this a couple weeks ago. I said these lists are so dependent on the situation. Who would you want on the power play? Who would you want defending a goal? Who would you want scoring a goal? There's so many different what ifs to making these lists that are difficult to rank properly. I mean, it would be hard to rank 1 through 5 efficiently. I would think if you look at everything, 5-on-5, 4-on-4, 5-on-4, everything included, it's very tough to say, this is the absolute number 1 and then everybody else is after that. It's tough because there's so many, like I said, when NHL Network put out their top centers list, if I want to defend a goal, I want Bergeron on the ice. If I want to score a goal, I'm looking at Crosby or Mark Scheifele or Malkin or somebody like that. It very much depends on the situation during the game. So, I mean, again, I'm kind of tiptoeing around the answer. I don't have a definitive number 1 because of that. Also because there's so many outstanding wings in the league. Yeah. The one I want your take on this real quick. NHL Network in their list put Patrick Kane 4, and I need your opinion because I am upset at that ranking.
I mean, I'm not looking at the list right now, but I do think Kane has lost a step. I wouldn't put him at 4. He's, when you look at his metrics, again, so here's a good one. So a big thing right now is you'll see on Twitter people throw out relative Corsi, stuff like that. Usually that's team relative, which in essence is a plus or minus stat. How does the team do with you on the ice compared to off the ice? To be honest, like it's a pretty garbage stat. Well, not garbage, like it's better than just normal Corsi, but it's relative to team data isn't that helpful because there's still a lot of white noise in it. Recently, guys like Evolving Wild on Twitter, the twins Josh and Luke, and a couple other guys have come up with relative to teammate metrics, which pretty much benchmark how a player does relative to every single individual teammate on the ice. And it's a much better view of how impactful this player actually is. Patrick Kane at relative to teammate expected goals for percentage. So in essence, expected goals for is shot quality data. He's 31st percentile in the NHL, which means usually when he's on the ice, relative to his teammates, his team doesn't do that. His team's letting up more expected goals over the last 2 years than they're generating. Nikita Kucherov, again, this is relative to teammates. So this is taking into account that he's often playing with Steven Stamkos. He's the 72nd percentile. Bergeron and Marchand are both up near like 98, 99th percentile. But Kane is in that mold of the player where he's fantastic on offense, but he does leave a lot to be desired on defense. And just in terms of expected goals against, just pure expected goals against, Patrick Kane is the 5th percentile among NHL forwards in the last 2 years.
Yikes.
And this is despite the fact, and people overrate zone starts, but despite the fact that he's one of the most sheltered forwards in the entire league in terms of how much he plays in the offensive zone compared to the defensive zone, and his expected goals against metric is still putrid. So he's really bad on defense, and so I'm big on overall players. I think forwards being able to play defense is key to a team's defensive strategy. And so I would not have Kane 4th. I'd probably put him closer to 10 than I would to 4.
I mean, in terms of the overall list, the NHL Network really is all over the map. They have Kane at 4. They have Arvidsson on the list. They have Rantanen on the list. They don't have Stone on there. They have Raquel on there. I mean, but besides Johnson's,
I take Chris Kreider over most of the guys you just named.
I would agree with you. I mean, we're Rangers fans, but at the same time, if you watch Kreider play and you look at what he does, he's a dominant player.
Yeah, I know people get pissed because he does, looks like he takes shifts off or games off and stuff like that. You know what? Every player in the NHL does, with the exception of very few. People overrate too much how inconsistent Kreider is. Most NHL players are streaky and inconsistent. I'm sure it's maddening to see Kreider look absolutely dominant and then not show up in the next game. But again, when you watch him play, when you look at his numbers, when you see what he can do, I'd have to look at the rest of the list and stuff like that. And he has been dealt with that injury last year, so it's tough. But there's an argument to be made that he belongs in that top 20 list, at least at the back end of it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, Mike really, I think, has a better overall list for sure than the NHL Network. I mean, he has Mark Stone in there. He has Mitch Marner in there. I mean, that
projecting forward a bit, it might be a bit early, but Marner's fantastic. I wouldn't argue too much with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know if I would put him in 19 right now, but again, there's at
least an argument to be made for it, whereas some of the other guys, I love Victor Arvidsson and he's a nice player and stuff like that, but there's very little argument to make for that he's better than Mitch Marner, let alone some of the other guys that were left off the list.
Absolutely.
And Rickard Raquel, he's had one good season where he scored a bunch of goals and shot way above normal shooting percentage. The regression's going to hit him hard.
Oh, yeah. I do like the fact that Mike Johnson, I mean, he put Blake Wheeler at 4. Big Blake
guy. Any analytic guy's a big Blake Wheeler guy.
Love Blake Wheeler. Yeah. I think he's one of the most underappreciated players in the entire history of the league.
Right, yeah.
This man puts up point-a-game numbers every season, and yet no one talks about that. It's almost as if he doesn't exist. I mean,
what's funny about Wheeler is he was under the analytics community loved him for so long because for the longest time, he put up incredible underlying metrics, and so that didn't make its way to the mainstream. This year, finally, Wheeler got the appreciation we've all wanted him to get for a while. He was in the Hart conversation because all the points he put up. This is actually probably the worst. This is easily one of the worst years he's had in years in terms of his underlying. And so I'm kind of just like laughing. I'm like, oh, of course, this is the year that he gets all this.
Blake Wheeler is a gem. I mean,
he's awesome. He's a hysterical dude too, and I'm all for
really
a player that wants to show their personality. Yeah, go look up some of his interviews and stuff. He is a great personality as well.
This was a show and a half, Drew, and I very much appreciate you taking the time to come on. Congratulations on the baby as well, Declan.
There you go.
The first overall pick in 2036. Number 2, of course, Sergei Ovechkin. Congratulations on that. I mean, this was a blast. I learned a lot. I now appreciate Tony DeAngelo. I thought I appreciated Marchand on the ice, his game, but now I appreciate it even more. I hope advanced analytics one day sooner rather than later, get to the point where they're appreciated by the vast majority of fans. We'll, fingers crossed for that. They only help the game. They don't hurt the game. It's one of those things where, you already see stats anyway. These are just more stats. I don't get the hate. I don't get why people are so attached to the eye test. I don't get it, but that's not...
The eye test is important. It's just they're used hand in hand.
Yes.
They use hand in hand.
Yes. See, you get it. I wish everyone thought that way.
Me too.
I wish everyone thought that way.
I tell you, I had a great time with this, and going forward, if you ever want me to jump on again, more than happy to. Thanks for having me on, and good luck with everything going forward.
Absolutely, much appreciated, Drew. Thank you so much. And that about does it for this week's episode of Chel Squared. Next week, I'll be in college, back at school, not recording at my house, but instead recording at my house in Syracuse. So no more sirens, I would hope. No more beeps, no more honks, no more whatever goes on outside, because again, I live in New York, near a road, near hospitals, near all of that. So there's a lot of sirens going on, and starting from next week, should be hearing a whole lot less of that. And I'll talk to you again next week.